Welcome to episode 18 of the Cows Report. I'm Will Reese, Cows Director, and in this episode, we lead off with a big interview where Ryan Bradley sits down with retiring Oklahoma Athletics Director Joe Castiglione. With his retirement approaching, Joe reflects on the defining moments of his career, the challenges and changes he has navigated across decades of leadership, and the lessons he has learned about building culture, sustaining excellence, and leading through transition in college athletics. Then, in the lobby, we continue the conversation with several of Joe's former colleagues, mentees, and friends. Nikki Moore of Cornell, Zach Selman of Mississippi State, and Ren Baker of West Virginia, in a conversation led by Mississippi State's Joey Bailey. Together, they reflect on the leadership lessons they learned from Joe, the personal impact he's had on their careers, and the lasting legacy he leaves within college athletics. Thanks for joining us on the Cows Report, where the conversation continues long after the event ends. Hey, Will here. Before getting the episode, I just want to say how excited we are this month to honor Joe Castiglione, who many would consider one of the greatest athletic administrators of the modern era. As many of you know, Joe hosted Cal's 2017 in Norman, has served as a faculty member several times over the years, and no matter the setting, the organization, the venue, he's always been incredibly generous with his time, especially when he's pouring into the next generation of leaders in college athletics. Of course, many of us that work in this profession build relationships across conferences, schools, and over time you end up cheering for a lot of people, programs, and teams. But as I like to say, we're all from somewhere. I'm from Oklahoma, and as we say around here, sooner born and sooner bred. Shortly after Joe C. announced his retirement a few months ago, I had a chance to reach out and share with him how much I appreciated the way he elevated the place and the team that I've loved since I was a boy, as well as the kindness he's shown me as I built a business in this industry. All the moments, the championships, the heartbreak, the Saturday game day group texts with family and friends, the bonding, the memories that become part of our stories. And as I think about it, what a cool part of the job that so many listeners of the podcast and the Cows community get to do. You help create moments and memories that bond people and families together. What meaningful work that is. We're honored to celebrate Joe C's leadership and legacy on this episode. And with that, we'll send it to Ryan and the big interview with the man himself.
It's time now for the big interview here on the Cows Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley, and I'm thrilled to be joined this week by the Vice President and Director of Athletics at the University of Oklahoma, a familiar friend and face to all of us who've been around Cows for a long time, Joe Castiglione. Joe C., thanks for making time to be with us. How are you?
Doing great, Ryan. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, appreciate your longtime support of Cows and Will and myself. I think it was 2017 when we hosted Cows in Norman, and I got the opportunity to write a feature piece on you back then. That's almost a decade ago now, and we're going to take a little bit of time this afternoon to look back on more than 30 years of an incredible career that you have had, not just at the University of Oklahoma, but as a thought leader and a mentor to many in the business. So just thrilled to have the opportunity to unpack this conversation with you. Really looking forward to it. When you look back on more than 3 decades as an athletic director, what are the moments and decisions that best define your tenure as an AD? Not necessarily the biggest wins, but the moments, the achievements, and the milestones that you're most proud of.
Well, like any leader, we all can have some level of a vision, some bolder than others. So I think it always started with a vision. First for myself, just the idea that I wanted to be a strong leader of a college athletic program and did what I thought was necessary to prepare myself for the eventual opportunity, which came in 1993. And but along the way, it's sort of a transformation process that leads to the success that one has later on. And I've told this story many times about how the transition from thinking about what you needed to do versus why you needed to do it, how that changed the whole perspective of leadership for me. And so when I became an AD, I certainly was very well aware of the necessary skills, tactics, strategies, everything you have. But at the core of everything I thought through and believed was important for the program I led started with the why. Why are we in this? And then you start looking at the strategies and the tactics to try to fulfill the why at the highest possible level. So that was the beginning of the arc for me. Um, then, understanding what a leader is all about and learning how to become the leader worth following would be another big moment of putting um, myself second to those that I was trying to positively influence, starting with the athletes themselves, although I don't work with them on a day-to-day basis like coaches do, but I felt like for me to make their experience world-class was to work through the coaches themselves and the support staff around each of our athletes. That was huge because the student athlete's been the center of everything I've ever considered doing as an athletics director. And then getting into the world and how to navigate, understanding change was inevitable, whether we were going to react to change or force change. And here today, that part hasn't changed. And so being very mindful of properly adapting and evolving and pivoting as necessary. But also there are many times when certain changes were coming that we needed to stand strong and maybe not just take the first opportunity to change. And as much as I like to be a first mover, sometimes being a smart mover was better than being a first mover. So those kinds of things that you learn. I don't know that anybody really sits you down and tells you all that, but you start to certainly get to a point where you prioritize. But getting people to believe in a vision and the mission and the buy-in, that was a big part of an arc. I had that at Missouri, and then coming here to Oklahoma 5 years later after becoming the AD at Missouri, those same process, having a big, bold plan and the strategies and tactics and the way we were going to be measured, and then investing in the buy-in and the necessary infrastructure to make the plan work. And all along the way, you're going to find opposition, you're going to find non-believers, you're going to find agitators, you're going to find laggards, whatever. Sometimes it takes a while to get everybody on board, but I can go back and think chapter and verse of how each of the proposals that we might have brought forward, the importance of building the consensus to get people involved, understanding what it was going to take, but also being okay with taking the risk. So when you think about that arc you asked of, those are the big components. We don't need to talk about any specific thing necessarily, but each of the accomplishments we've had all had those sort of starting and midpoints before we ever got to the success.
Think about how football dominates the headlines. It dominates, the money follows in a lot of ways what's happening with football today. Early in your tenure at Oklahoma, you had to make a very critical football hire that turned out pretty well, if memory serves. How did that opportunity and the way it played out and the success that the Oklahoma football program began to have in the early 2000s serve as a catalyst for a lot of the things that you were able to implement and drive forward for the entire athletic department at Oklahoma?
Well, you really figured out how to ask these questions in good order, because there's the perfect example of a decision creating an arc towards a successful conclusion. And I know you're talking about the hiring of Coach Bob Stoops, and without a doubt, that was a critical moment for our entire athletic program. It wasn't that other programs weren't on various thresholds of being successful or successful. At that time, men's basketball had a really good run going under Kelvin Sampson. Coach Gasso was starting to make her presence known by winning the conference. And then a couple of years later, winning their first national championship, their first of what's now become 8 national championships. So, there was some success, but hiring Coach Stoops, thinking through all the different elements that would attract him here and help him once he took over, it changed the whole trajectory of our program because, a place like Oklahoma, not unapologetic to say, but football is massively important, not just to the university, but to our state. And it goes back a long, long ways, many decades when this state was struggling and going through the Depression and the Dust Bowl and, just, seeking, a way forward. And football gave it an identity that it had nationally. And, it certainly helped lift not just spirits, but a lot of things that needed to take place in a state when it needed investment and belief. And so you think about that, well, we're certainly talking about the college athletic program, you can see that same dynamic play its way out after a long period of struggle with Oklahoma football, and then Coach Stoops coming aboard and vaulting us to success. Now, like we see happening in a couple of programs, most notably just here in the last few weeks or a month, where hiring a coach turns into a national championship after their second year. We had that experience at Oklahoma. But we started investing in the necessary elements that help a program be successful even before we won that national championship. And one of them goes back to what I said earlier, was taking a leap of faith and getting out there and launching a capital campaign and setting a goal of $120 million in less than 3 years. And people looked at us like we were really nuts. And a lot of people that are watching this would never know, but we launched that campaign the night before we played Nebraska in football. We were going through a gauntlet of a schedule in October, but that schedule and the success of that schedule is what launched us in a position to play for and ultimately win a national championship. But we made the conscious decision back in August, way before the season started, that we were going to launch this capital campaign the night before we played Nebraska. At the time, Nebraska was on a heck of a roll. They had won 3 national championships, and you could consider them, right at that moment, the gold standard in college football. Just so happens they're a longtime rival of Oklahoma, and we happened to be hosting them that particular year. And people thought, well, what shouldn't you plan that on a weekend when you've got a chance to win the game? I mean, they were already giving up before we ever got started. And we said, no, because this is what we're going to be measured against, and this is how we're going to show everybody that we can build our program to be championship caliber. Well, the weeks leading up to it, we had beaten a number 5 Texas and a number 2 Kansas State. And here comes number 1 overall Nebraska rolling into town. And we had that event all teed up on a Friday night before the game and turned around. And on the next day, we beat Nebraska and became number 1 after that victory. So, yes, there's a bit of good fortune and good planning, but being bold is part of it. So I tell you that because your question about how that changed the trajectory for our program, we were able to invest in programs that hadn't had any investment for a long time, if ever. We had sports that didn't have a place to practice or compete on campus, and we're competing in the Big 12. It's the University of Oklahoma. Things had really gone off track for a while, but we could get more people to understand the credibility of what we were telling them and why we thought it would work when they started seeing some success. I came from the show me state. I understand people like to see something before it actually happens, see something happen before they actually contribute. So those kinds of moments really meant the world. And we did exactly what we set out to do. We raised 122 million in less than 3 years and made some enormous facility investments. And it was a campaign that literally touched every single sport we sponsored. And at the time, we've added another one since. But we were able to demonstrate this is how you invest in a program, and that success will follow if you have the right investment.
You've hired and supported and also transitioned some of the most visible and successful coaches in the country during your tenure. You've already named a few of them. What are the common attributes that you found in successful coaches, and what is the most important role that you play as the AD in helping them be successful?
Well, I've always framed it in a short version of the combination of IQ and EQ. Um, and I think the best coaches, the most successful, the ones that sustain a level of success for a long, long time, um, possess those qualities that help them both intellectually as well as emotionally. And it's not just how they run or lead their own life, but it's how they lead others and how they build, the understanding, the teaching elements, the identification of key qualities in other people, the managing of the moments. I mean, after all, we're in a business that is built on emotion, let's face it, but managing the emotions oftentimes can be a big difference in the success or failure in a game, or having, good performance on a long period of time so you have successful seasons. And we don't have an ability of guaranteeing outcomes, but we certainly understand if we buy into a specific process that teaches and develops, a good discipline around key qualities and skills, and preparation for moments, that you have a better chance of having success more often than not. And obviously that weighs in when people that are charged with the responsibility of finding people who have skills that can be brought into a the formula that they have for success, to be aligned with the identity that they want their teams to have, and going into competition and facing the best there is in the country. You have to have the people that are on the front lines that are performing and be prepared, to be taught, to be developed, to be supported. That you have to have those abilities and the confidence to do that. And those are the things that I have found, to be most important. And yeah, you could talk about their ability to, meet with the media, and their ability to connect with people, all of which are very, very important. But those skills are still embedded in, a person's intelligence and their, from a technical side, or, from an emotional side. And I find them to be very, very critical.
And you talked earlier about you spend most of your time trying to help the coaches, support the coaches, make sure they have the resources they need to be successful. Um, it's identifying and then supporting them. So what is that support part? What does it look like for you? What have been the most critical things that you have done as an athletic director to help ensure that your coaches are positioned for sustained success?
Well, being a partner to them through the entire process. I mean, I believed in hiring great coaches, giving them the tools or the resources that they need to supplement the skills they already have, including, the ability to fund and retain a great coaching or support staff. Um, Facilities are certainly part of that, but there are big moments all along the way of a journey of a preparing for a season as well as the season itself, that I've always believed in, um, being there as a resource myself. I kind of used this saying many times when I've hired a coach, that I understand the hierarchy and everybody knows who reports to who. So certainly the role clarity is there. But I also tell them the moment that you go to work for me, I immediately go to work for you. And I have believed in, being there to be the resource for them and helping take care of some of the things that allow them to put most of their energy in the areas that matter most. And that's the things that help a program be successful. And we know today's world, that's a lot, but you've got to, stay focused on the key elements of any program success, and allowing them um, to identify and to recruit the best of the brightest and bring them here and have the tools and the resources to develop them, to be aligned in the identity that the team has for its formula for success, to help in some of the battles, to be there and share in some of the challenges, the highs and the lows, and to support them in our program. And I'm not necessarily in their office every single day, but I'm out getting the resources that we need to set them up for success, and understanding what that is, understanding what the competitors are doing, and most importantly, what it takes for us to be successful in a very, very competitive world.
Oklahoma has been remarkably consistent across all of its sports offerings during your tenure. That wasn't always the case. How intentional was that as you set out your vision for what Oklahoma could become, and what were the systems and principles that allowed you to build sustainable success, not just in football or men's basketball, but across all of your sports programs?
I'd like to tell you there's a magic formula. Um, I guess maybe if I had a magic formula, maybe should market it a little bit more before telling everybody. But seriously, Ryan, I think the word you used, intentionality, is big in our success. You can't ever aspire to something if you aren't properly articulating, it as a vision or a goal, and then putting the strategy together to make it happen. How we make it happen at Oklahoma might be slightly different than other places make it happen. We have challenges, we have opportunities, we have strengths, we have weaknesses, and we have to work through all of those kinds of things to set our programs up for success in any of our given endeavors. But also, recognizing, what the steps are and how we are going to position ourselves to take each one of them as we ascend to the top, in getting there. And then when you get there, knowing that, no one has a stake, to stay there without constantly looking at yourself in a way to get better. And I know people say, what are you going to do to defend a championship? But we're not defending anything. We won it. They're not going to take it away. We have to, recalibrate and figure out how we're going to go win another one. And so we've always, had that level of humility, about us, and the way that we go about our planning and how that conveys to the athletes and how that inspires them in their out of season work programs as well as in season preparation, and how to instill that belief, that can come from, the confidence of winning, but knowing that it's not an automatic, that you have to go back out and earn it again. And so, we've looked at everything that we thought would be considered important to that formula, but nothing more important, and no place has had a greater focus on our ability to be successful than the investment in people themselves. That's been the difference maker. Hiring and retaining the best coaches, because in turn, best coaches go out and recruit the best and the brightest athletes. And at the core of everything that we've considered ever doing, we knew that was going to be the key to our success. We've done it in programs that didn't have, the newest of facilities, Now they have great facilities. We've never let excuses get in the way of making something happen. Um, Oftentimes, that's a problem. People make excuses for something not happening instead of figuring out how to overcome whatever challenges that you have to make something happen. We've always had such a great working relationship with each other. Everybody knew their role, everybody knew their responsibility, everybody understood the accountability of it all, and we weren't shy about holding each other accountable. And those kinds of values and qualities that go with skills have been a big part of our success.
One of the biggest decisions you were a part of in the last few years was the decision to move to the SEC. A couple of years removed now from that decision, when you reflect on that transition, what are the aspects of that decision that you think maybe still aren't completely understood by the public, in terms of the things that you were weighing out, in terms of the pros and cons and the rationale for why this was the time to make that decision? And as you've moved forward over the last couple of years and integrated your programs into the SEC, what have you seen that has fortified, or affirmed that that was the right decision for the University of Oklahoma?
Well, I guess I'll keep some of that for my book. I don't want to put all of this out on the podcast, but
It'll help the book sales, I'm sure, Joe.
yes, it will. Uh, well, as you could imagine, Ryan, we didn't arrive at a decision like that quickly or haphazardly. It started first with how we did a deep dive about ourselves, about our program, about our university, about the level of success that we were having, but what it was going to take to be successful going into a world that was going to experience some level of disruption. I don't know that we could have completely envisioned the level of chaos and disruption that we're experiencing right now, but we thought it was going to be disruptive. And there were two goals that we had in considering any decision was, based on stability and sustainability. And it can't go back in this period of time and on this podcast and rewrite, everything that we saw going forward. But we knew change was coming, and it was a choice for us to either be a part of effectuating change or having to respond to it and maybe having fewer options available to us from which to choose. And again, none of us are completely clairvoyant to see the world exactly how it would evolve, but I could tell you that a lot of things took place that we learned through our study about ourselves, study about the world of college athletics, where it was headed, and many of them have come to fruition. Now, you couldn't put your palm out, and I couldn't read it for you and have that kind of a forward-thinking ability, but I just feel like the due diligence we did before we ever thought about a decision like that paid dividends for us in so many ways, and it was tough. I've said this many, many times. We had great respect for the Big 12 and our partners in the Big 12. And anytime you think about something like this, automatically people, want to turn it into something very negative. And it wasn't like that at all. It was difficult and it was emotional. And I realized, when both Texas and Oklahoma announced, their petition for membership in the SEC, that was a massive transformational moment. And once we were approved for membership, it was difficult for any of us sitting around the table to look toward each other, because I do understand the emotions that went along with that. And these were colleagues, and to this day, we've talked through a lot of it, and have gotten in a better place. But I think if they were in our shoes and did the serious level of preparation, to think through the opportunities Oklahoma needed to seize in the future, and had this opportunity to consider membership in the SEC, I think they would have all found themselves at the same place, because that's what leaders are supposed to do. And so obviously this wasn't a one person endeavor. This involved our president and our board. It was challenging because we also, by leaving the Big 12, we were leaving a conference with a university within our state, that we play often. And everybody considers a rival, of course. We weren't always in the same conference, but for years since the late 50s, we have been. And so that was difficult, still is for a lot of people. So I'm very cognizant of all of that. But we're charged with leading the University of Oklahoma and looking out for the best interest of Oklahoma and where we fit in the landscape of college athletics and what we need for our programs to be successful. And with the level of disruption that we saw coming, the importance of finding a place for stability and sustainability, like I said earlier, would be vitally important to the future of our athletics program and university, because, athletics is such a important element to creating more visibility for the institution itself. It's not the most important thing, but it certainly plays a role in the way a lot of people view a university. And so we were very considerate of all of that. And as it's turned out, it's validated virtually all of our assessments and reasons, for seeking this change. It's been a great transition. It's obviously very challenging competitively, but we knew that. And it's something that we look forward to being part of and improving our program to be more successful in a conference like this. But it's also elevated a lot of other things with our program. And now collectively with the 15 other member institutions of the SEC, we're navigating the world the best way possible. The fit has been natural, and we're very grateful the way Commissioner Sankey and all the member institutions have welcomed us. I think I would speak similarly for my colleague, Chris Delcani at Texas. It's been really a smooth transition from many, many perspectives.
How has the athletic director job fundamentally changed? How is it different today than when you started? And are the skill sets that are non-negotiables for the next generations of ADs, are they the same or are they different? Are they going to have different skill sets in order to be successful in navigating the challenges that you're facing at the end of your tenure as an AD versus the beginning?
Yeah, this is a tough question because we don't yet have a sustainable structure or any semblance of a sustainable structure to point to. So it's hard to, basically say that this skill or that skill is going to be the one that stands the test of time. But there's one thing that's absolutely certain, and that's several years we've been dealing with, the impact of NIL or whatever you want to call it, the transition to rev share and third-party NIL to the transfer portal, seemingly is, more and more of a professionalized approach to college sports. We certainly know we're not going backwards. I hope people have realized that by now. If you haven't, maybe back 2 or 3 years ago when this all started. But I think, there are certain characteristics that still apply. Obviously, we talked a lot about the building of a program, the hiring of coaches, the ability to work successfully with coaches and staffs and people that are geared toward developing athletes. There's still, great deal of importance around those elements. But we're all having to face rosters that are being built based on the financial investment. And we can go a whole nother podcast about how unsustainable the road we're traveling on is right now. But someone that's understands that new landscape, I say a lot of people are talking about driving new revenue, and a little bit of that sounds, I don't know, tone deaf to me, because I could go back and talk to you about how the successful programs, and we're a perfect example. We've been driving new revenue for 28 years. We had to take ourselves out of a operating hole that was deeper than anybody could imagine, and we had to pay all that money back to the university before we started investing in those programs way back in the early 2000s, as you were talking about, Ryan. So we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to hire or retain great coaches. We wouldn't have been able to have new facilities or all the different resources that athletes need. We wouldn't have been able to be the pioneer in mental health as we were back in 2002, hiring the first licensed clinical psychologist in any athletic program in the country, or wouldn't have been able to be as innovative in some of the areas in sports medicine or applied science or nutrition or the resources that help these athletes. All of those took a financial investment. So I just call BS on, you got to be a revenue generator. Like no one ever had to be that before. That being said, you have to be a revenue generator, of course. And, finding the ways that, are now more strategically going to helping, identify and then properly sign and retain athletes, just like you used to do with coaches, and properly allocating resources, to the sports as they need. That's certainly tough in a market where there really isn't a defined market yet. Just the market of how we go forward to invest in the sports as best we can with the available financial resources. Certainly, the world is going to change. We are just now starting to see, contracts emerge and provisions in contracts that might be enforceable. I think somewhere along the line, we're going to see, enforceable contracts, ways that, athletes will stay put in a place, a little bit longer. I've heard coaches talk about some of the things they'd like to see. I won't start naming one or two of them, although some recently in our own conference have been really putting some great ideas out there about what they'd like to see, from the transfer portal to agreements to how we fund rosters and creating, an appropriate level of financial support to go with what we do to offer athletes. An AD needs those kinds of skills. We always talk about an AD leading, a 360-degree way. And I don't think it's ever been more important for an AD to understand how you lead the stakeholders that are all around. There's probably no position on a campus quite like an athletics director. And in today's world, more than ever, because you're constantly having communication and direct either delegation or dialogue with a variety of stakeholders that all have a very big investment in the success of the program. So communication has to be at a premium. And we know we're in a world where sometimes the communication can get out in front of, the true substance of what's going on, so we've got to manage, those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, it's still going to get back to how successful a program is. So knowing the elements that it takes to be successful are going to be critical for any AD in any situation going forward. I will say one thing is never losing sight of who you are and what you're about. The why of what you do, the core values that you hold a deep conviction for, all are very important, in, in addition to the elite skills that you might have in leading this next generation. But don't lose sight of that, because people still want to look at those to follow and decide if that leader is worth following. And I think that's always going to be a constant, regardless of the world we're in.
That's a great insight. You've built your reputation on steady leadership and integrity, and now we find ourselves in an industry that is defined by pressure and volatility. How did you protect your values while navigating the politics, the financial pressures, and the constant expectations around your programs?
Discipline, just simple as that. I spoke earlier, and you've alluded to it as well, Ryan. We've always been in a world that has changed to some degree. Some periods of time were more volatile than others, but just because you're in a changing world and you do understand how to get ahead of change sometimes, or lead change, be a forward thinker, prepare a program for any type of event that it might encounter. You still can be, a clear adopter of values that stand the test of time through any period that challenges you. And I always say, your core values are values of conviction, not convenience. You don't get to choose which one you're going to abide by in the storm. If you don't like the core value you have, decide which one it is when you're not being challenged, but not in the middle of being challenged, because then it wasn't a core value to begin with. You pick what those values are. You could see on this wall right back here the word magic. That word was chosen because it has a lot of meaning to people here at Oklahoma that know what Sooner Magic's all about, but it's also the acronym for our department's core values. And I can tell you every time that every decision we make represents those core values. And if it doesn't, then the word A is accountable, and I want people to call it out. Not that we've had any of those where they needed to be called out, but accountability is a big part of our value system here. And we've got to be accountable to ourselves, but at times maybe it's not comfortable, but people have to call others out when they're not staying true to what we had planned to do. And maybe there are reasons, but you don't get to compromise the values, regardless of the reasons that something might be succeeding or failing. The values always stay the same. So I cannot emphasize that enough.
You mentioned at the top of our conversation that you and I have had the opportunity to do this several times through the years. You hosted CALS in Norman pretty early in CALS formation as an entity. You've been a friend and a mentor to Will and myself and so many others for so many years. What has the CALS community meant to athletic administrators over the years from your perspective, and why are spaces like ours and the conversation that you and I are having today important for leaders who are both in the chair and young athletic administrators who are aspiring to be an AD someday?
Well, I've been fortunate to be involved in a variety of different organizations that always had at its core developing the next generation of leaders. Before CALS, I was president of NACDA, and a lot of the people that go to CALS are also avid attendees at NACDA. I've been involved in NCAA professional development seminars, development of future coaches. It just something that I've always felt like I needed to do as part of my way of giving back, for respect those that I followed at one time and were willing to take time out of their schedule to help me learn. And although you can't see it, I'd have to turn, I don't know if I could turn my camera here, but you can see there's a wall over here with a lot of hats. There's those that I've hired and who have worked for me, many of which have gone through CALS or are now faculty members at CALS. They know that how much I value and I guess could say feel fortunate that I could be part of their career journey. And the hats on the wall that I just indicated are of those that I have hired and mentored who have gone on to be athletics directors, or now there are 2 conference commissioners in the group. Many of those, work for me here at Oklahoma, quite a few that I had hired at Missouri, that I know are CALS faculty. I just felt like part of me helping them be the best in their job was also helping them along the way to fulfill their career aspirations. So CALS is just an extension of that. And I really enjoy going. I really enjoy interacting with the next generation of leaders. I love hearing their questions. I like feeding off their energy. I can think back to when I was in their shoes and I used to just make up questions to go up to other ADs and ask you. It was just a made up concept I might have had in my mind, but it just created a moment that I could go up and interact with ADs and just get them to know who I was. And maybe at some point they might remember that conversation, even if it was a made up reason. But we didn't have as many of those professional development opportunities around like there is today. And I'm going to always continue to be supportive of not only CALS, but the people that are going through it and helping them achieve their lifelong dreams. That's a big blessing somebody can have. I mean, I play a small role, but having 33 people that I've mentored to go on to be ADs is something I'm very proud of.
Well, I know I speak for many others when I express my gratitude for your generosity and your accessibility, not just to those who have worked directly for you, but those of us like Ren Baker and myself who had the opportunity to work at other institutions in Oklahoma and cross paths with you. And you've always just been so generous with your time and willingness to answer our made up questions and reasons for just to want to glean some wisdom from you along the way. And so we're just grateful for that legacy and spirit of generosity for your willingness to give back and to engage with us and with the CALS community. Last question. When you look back on the Joe Castiglione era at Oklahoma and your entire tenure in college athletics, what do you hope that people will remember and say about you and about your leadership and the impact that you made on the institutions that you led and on college athletics as a whole?
Well, I hope that they're not just proud of all the success that we've been able to accomplish, and it's been a lot, and it's not because of me, it's because we were smart enough to find the best people and put them in the best positions they could ever be in to be successful and support them. And it wasn't always, a smooth path. We stuck through, we were diligent, we were patient, or we were basically doggedly persistent, to pursuing the goals that we had and never let, all the naysayers get in our way of achieving what we believed is possible. I think that, they would always know that whatever decision, whether they liked it or not, was always made with the best interests of the University of Oklahoma and its people we serve in mind. And not about whether you're popular for making a decision, is whether or not it was the right decision. And it's not just that we won, it was the way we won. We did it in representing the state, the university, and the people we get to work with, or the people that step up like fans and donors and ticket holders. that all step up to help us, that we represented them the right way, that they can not only be happy that the success occurred, but be proud of the way it happened. And that we were able to make it happen in a lot of sports. And I look into the eyes of athletes that are in sports that maybe aren't as visible as sports like football or basketball or baseball, softball, gymnastics, our great programs, men's and women's, they're all been at the top, competing for championships, but the other sports have had their opportunities too. And they come here with the same hopes and dreams as some of the other athletes that get maybe more attention than their sport gets, but that we did it so they could have the same level of a world-class experience. And more than anything, that it was about helping people be their best, and pouring into them so they can fulfill the same dreams that we had for them, that they have for themselves, and that they could do it at a place where they felt valued and appreciated and respected, and we were always together and working through whatever the challenges were. And let's face it, it's not all, we're not all a bunch of unicorns here. We had to go through some tough moments too, but that they always look back and say, it's, whatever the journey was, in the end, the journey was worth it. And that we got to do it with the people we love being with. And that, I, played a small role for sure. That's not just my humility. It's true. It's more important to put the people who are out there competing out in front. And I always believe that was the most important, the athletes and coaches, and the rest of us will be here doing everything we can to help them be successful. And we got to do it as a family. I think finally, and most importantly, we did it as a family. Our families are inextricably linked, whether it's our immediate family or the Sooner family, that no matter what, we did it as a family.
Well, Joe, you've always been known for your humility and your integrity, but make no mistake, you have had a monumental role in shaping not only the success of the University of Oklahoma, but college athletics and the leadership within athletic administration across the country for more than 3 decades. So we are so grateful for that impact and that legacy that you have left on us. We're grateful for the time today. We're excited for you in the next chapter of your life. Excited and looking forward to reading that book someday. But more than anything, thank you for your friendship and your mentorship, and for taking the time to invest once again in cows and the cows community. We couldn't be more grateful.
Well, Ryan, I thank you. I thank all the people I've met through cows. I thank the people we've been talking about, our athletes and our coaches and our staff, our administration, the presidents I've worked for, the many board members I've worked for, but mostly too, it gets my colleagues, the ADs I've got a chance to work with around the country, the commissioners, leaders, at the NCAA, anybody that had a hand in somebody's success. We know we don't do it by ourselves. And as I move into a different phase, I'll be finding ways to thank all of them and express my genuine gratitude, because again, it's because everybody works together. You find a way where you're part of something bigger than any one person. And when you realize you do things together, then you're going to have a lot more success than doing it by yourself. And I'm just really grateful, and a product of if anything I've done well is because we've all worked together.
It's great insight. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Welcome to a special lobby segment of the Cows Report. Today, we're excited to spend time talking about the legacy, leadership, and lessons learned from the Oklahoma Athletics Director, Joe Castiglione, who announced his plans for retirement this past summer. I'm Joey Bailey, and it is an honor to have the opportunity to talk about my former boss and teammate, Joe Castiglione. In my time at the University of Oklahoma, I was able to see firsthand the consistency, standards, and commitment to excellence that Joe C. established within his department. In the latter part of my time at Oklahoma, I had the good fortune to work with Joe day to day as we worked on strategic initiatives to transition Oklahoma into the Southeastern Conference. Throughout my time working with Joe, there are countless opportunities, a dozen championships, and valuable lessons learned that we could talk about. But the thing that stands out the most as I reflect on Joe's impact is Joe's desire to help the next generation of leaders. Joining me today is a special group of leaders who have also experienced this firsthand. Dr. Nikki Weber-Moore, the Director of Athletics at Cornell. Ren Baker, who's the VP and Director of Athletics at West Virginia University. And my current boss, Zach Selman, who's the Director of Athletics at Mississippi State University. Let's dive in. Starting with Dr. Moore, will you share more about your background and how you came to know Josie?
Yes, so glad to be a part of this. Joe is such a special human being, and had such an influence in my life. Our connection dates back to my experience at the University of Missouri. I arrived as a walk-on athlete on the track and field team at the zoo way back in 1992. And I think I really met Joe, got to know Joe my second year. They'd been talking about a new track for a long time there, and then they made some changes where we didn't have a track at all, and I got involved as a student athlete with Joe, and talking to donors and talking to people at the state, and so we became. He was my AD. That's how I got to know Joe, and as I think back on that now from this perspective, I just think about how engaged he was with student athletes, how I felt like I felt like he respected me as a student athlete, and, it felt like we were co-creators of something. And then, of course, in fact, on the last day of Joe's time at Mizzou, I was a graduate student by that time. As he was heading off to Oklahoma, he invited me to his office and said, someday we'll work together again. And at that time, I was not even thinking about being in athletics. But he's always had that special knack of seeing around the corner. And so I've known him since then, and so much more to say, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Ren, what about you?
So as a very young administrator and coach, I was the AD and basketball coach at Rogers State University, and that university is governed by the Oklahoma Board of Regents. And so as we were building policy and looking at things, I would be pulling policy from all over the country and write it, put something together, and then they would just say, well, why don't you just copy what OU has so that we don't have to redo this? And so a couple of rounds of that, I actually reached out to Joe. By this point, he was one of the titans of the industry. Hoping I could spend 10, 15 minutes with him sometime. And we set up a meeting, and he spent several hours with me. And we developed a friendship from there that has lasted through many stops for me. I think I've called him every time I've ever taken a job and got his advice and his thoughts, and just become a great friend like he has to so many people. And, the thing I just love and admire about him is his willingness to give of his time. And the more that I've grown in this business, the more I realize how precious that time is. It's probably the most valuable commodity that we own. So he's just become a great influence, a great mentor, a great friend, and somebody that I really value and trust, not just on work-related issues, but I've called him and talked to him about family-related issues as well.
Thanks, Ren. Zach?
Yeah, growing up in Norman, knew who Joe was and was able to spend some time around him as a youngster, but really got to know him. I ran into him at my sister Shannon's wedding in the buffet line of all places. And at the time I was working in packaging in Oklahoma City, and Joe gave me an opportunity, and similar to what Ren said, I remember I had my old school AOL.com email address, and I'm so foolish for even trying to email Joe and get a meeting with him. And I'll never forget, just got an email back and got to spend time with him in his office, and was able to be a graduate assistant for him. And I think from the first moment you're around him, you know he genuinely cares about you. And it's not just us three or us four on this call, but it's so many people that he's multiplied throughout our industry. And again, the buffet line at my sister's wedding is one of those tipping point moments for my life. I was more nervous about having to go dance on the dance floor, but ended up being a job and a mentorship and a friendship. And I don't even, there's not enough words for me to say about Joe. I consider him family.
You guys obviously have spent a lot of time with him through the years, but what is one principle or habit, if you can just pick one, that you carry with you in your leadership style today and how you work with people today? I'm going to start with you, Ren.
Yeah, I think it is that authenticity and genuineness in the way that he cares about developing people. This is a business where there's a lot of pressures, there's a lot of external judgments, there's the time constraints, the issues, and it's really easy to lose sight of a purpose. And I think he's remained true to his purpose, whether it's coaches or student athletes or people in the industry. He genuinely cares about developing you. But the humility that he does it with, I've never had a conversation with him where he didn't pick my brain about an issue or something. And most of the time I initiated the call to ask his advice, and while he's got you, he'll take the time to do that. And so I think just the genuineness, the authenticity, and the humility that he has possessed over a 30-year career, that's probably one of the best 30-year careers that anybody's ever had at an institution like he's had at Oklahoma, is really something that that I probably think about a lot and try to remember how he made me feel as I was coming up in the industry, and try to do that same thing for others to the best that I can.
Zach, what about you?
Joe is just rooted in his purpose. And that's one of the best leadership lessons that I think I've ever learned. And it's stuck with me for so long is, he does it for the right reasons. And he does it because he genuinely loves student athletes. He genuinely believes in higher education. He genuinely believes in people around him. So I think when you look at his tenure in college sport, he sees that as his life's work because he means it. And I think because of that, there's a lot of things that Ren just described, of the humility and the constant quest for improvement. And then besides purpose, I'll also add in consistency. Joe has been consistent, and it's hard in the day-to-day to always be the same person. And he's got a great routine that he constantly goes through. The way he approaches the good and the bad is consistent. And that's something that are the two things that will always stick with me about my 13 years with Joe, would be just rooted in your purpose and be consistent through the good and the bad.
I think my colleagues took more than one word, or one trait. But I'm glad, because there's so many good things to say. The first thing that comes to mind is the student athlete experience that Zach talked about, and genuinely being committed to that. I would say too, the other thing that really comes to mind is excellence, like this really almost a sense of courage or steadiness about holding a level of excellence that that people around him just strive for. You just find yourself alongside other people, trying to keep getting a little better. And there's, I guess the other thing in terms of what I find myself going back to a lot is intention. Like, everything that Joe does is with great intention, rooted in purpose that Zach talked about. There's no haphazardness. There's no chaotic. There's nothing. It's a steady path toward a clear vision that somehow he managed to see before the rest of us do.
Dr. Moore, you hit on it perfectly. steady under pressure. And I think all of us have witnessed that in various forms. And I always think about his discernment when making a decision as something that I really value and learned a lot from him. Zach, you've worked with him most recently. Can we start with you on just how you felt like you were able to learn from him in those tough, high pressure situations, and maybe some things you observed from him?
Yeah, it's kind of one tangible example as we were all experiencing COVID as a nation, I guess as a world, and then as we look at it from a college athletics lens, there's a lot of challenges that come with the pandemic, and the way that Joe led, the tireless effort that he gave to make sure that everybody was safe, and it wasn't just because there was a self-interest or motivated by the wrong reasons to play games. It was first, can I help other people in the community, and what can I do for people around the world? Then it becomes, okay, if we can get to a spot to play games, what do we have to do to play games safely? And so I think COVID was one of the just masterful leadership it's not even less than just experiences I was able to witness that Joe was able to lead us through. And again, he did it with grace, humility. When we're all going through these things personally, you never felt that with Joe. He always put the people that he was leading, and it's a huge group of people, that he always put other people first to make sure you go through those tough situations. And that's something I just always remember and stand out to me when there's all these challenges, but Joe is always just cool, calm, and collected to find a solution of how we can move forward.
Yeah. And it was never about him. I don't remember him ever centering himself in a crisis or in a pressure situation. I always remember it just was remarkable. He would always ask the next question and then the next question. Even when we thought around him, we thought through all the things, and then he would help us think of another perspective to consider, and which goes back to a little bit, Joey, that you were talking about. It was this deliberate, kind of approach to a situation, and I don't know that the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Joe is creativity, but when you look at really what he did and how he would manage, whether it was a crisis or a challenge of some kind, there was a lot of creativity at play in terms of, trying to think outside the box and not be beholden to, what we've done before or what everyone else is doing, but this ability to kind of iterate and use the best of the people around him, to like it actually felt like he listened, and he wanted to hear others' perspectives, and so anyway, he's managed a lot of them over the years in really good ways.
Ren, what about you?
Yeah, I think Zach said a lot of the things that I would say, and obviously Nikki and Zach and you have been in the war room with him. I've observed more as a friend and colleague, but not in the same department. But I do think, everybody says don't get too high with the highs or low with the lows, and that's so much easier said than done. And I don't know that I haven't seen Joe show a lot of emotion, period, but I've never seen him show negative emotion during tough times. Whether you're watching him at a press conference, you're talking to him on the phone, he's just got this calmness and certainty and connectedness to him that you just know, like, hey, everything's going to be okay, and we're going to get through this and figure this out. And it really kind of reminds me of when you think about being a true professional. I don't know that anybody embodies that more than Joe. For those of us he feels really comfortable with, it'll manifest in different ways, like him telling us we need to dress better at meetings and those kind of things. But he is Joe carries himself with the utmost class. And I'll remember when I was coming into the job here, Oklahoma was leaving the league to go to the SEC, and we've all been a part of different league transitions, and usually those relationships get really strained. And Joe remarkably maintained those relationships and was very well respected, very well liked, all the way to Oklahoma's last day in the league. And so that's something I admire and respect, and it just shows the respect people have for him, but also the respect that he has for other people, and the way that he operates on the same level, no matter what the storms around him are.
Exactly. Now, Dr. Moore, you talked about how your interactions were when you were a student athlete and he was an administrator. I know that we all think about his long-term relationships with coaches. He's had coaches who've had long tenures under him. And so for you guys, what are some of the lessons that you feel like you've learned and how he's been able to manage trust, accountability? And very rare is it that we see coaches be at one institution for as long as they are, as well as Joe. But you guys talk about that and where you feel like a lot of that success came from?
Yeah, thanks. I think he was very clear about expectations. And those expectations were high. But I think coaches knew what was expected, and then he also provided, he would help provide the resources to be able to actually do that. And most coaches, in my experience, they want to win. They want to know how to win. They want to know what winning looks like. And I think they also want to feel supported. Joe was very present. He showed up at events and showed up at not just the main events all the time. And going back to just how we just talked about how he cares about people, I do think that coaches acknowledge or recognize that he did care about them, as people as well. He also wasn't afraid to challenge anybody. He's never been afraid to challenge people to do better.
Yeah, that's really important. I think, that hard conversations are uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I always felt like he was able to handle those in the right way. So, Zach, what's you?
One thing is Joe always has high expectations and high standards, and it's easy to say that, but then as a leader of a program, what are you doing to help that coach meet those high expectations? And I feel like Joe does a masterful job of not just saying, hey, these are the high standards of what we want for our program, but then he works tirelessly to resource appropriately. And then also, I think he stays out of the way. He's there along with them. It's not, he never wants the credit for it. I think the biggest joy Joe gets is when he sees student athletes be successful, when he sees coaches be successful. And that's just doesn't stop in that moment, but for the rest of their life. The amount of times that I was able to witness Joe just sacrifice his time to go spend with a player that played 40, 50, 60 years ago because he sees it as a lifelong commitment. And again, nowadays, you live in an era where everybody wants credit for what they've done. It was never about that with Joe. I can't count as many times I've talked to coaches that are that have had some opportunity to work for Joe, and could be currently or way back in the day, that always say Joe's the best at what he's done, because high expectations, whatever resources that needed to meet those expectations, and then when those expectations are met, Joe's applauding, not out front trying to celebrate like I did that. And I think that's a really important lesson that I continue to carry with me every day.
Ren?
Yeah, I remember one of the first meetings I had with Joe. I was still at Rogers State, and I was still the AD and the head men's basketball coach. But we were growing that program to a point to where I didn't feel like I could continue to do both. And so I was talking to Joe about it. I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about just becoming AD," and I wanted to get his advice. And he I'll never forget he said this. He said, "You should, he said, you will be a great AD, but he said, I would coach a little bit longer because it'll make you a better AD." And he said, "I wish that I could go back in my own career and I could coach a little bit because I think that would make me a better athletic director." And he said, "You probably don't understand how valuable your coaching experience is right now, but you will one day." And I've thought about that so much because he is right. I've worked with a lot of administrators that get really frustrated with coaches, and I think because I coached that short time, it did give me an ability to probably understand their position a little bit better. And I just think again, it shows Joe's humility and his desire to understand the other person's position and to learn about it. I mean, here he was, he had hired Bob Stoops, he had won a natty, he had been to the men's basketball and women's basketball Final Fours, he had stacked national championships. He was one of the most successful athletic directors in college sports history. And he was talking about how he wished he could go back and coach a little bit so he would be better at the job. And so I just think that makes him a great leader for coaches because he truly has a heart and a desire to understand their position, the pressures they face, and to equip them with the tools and the support to be successful, and the support when maybe they're not as successful as they want to be or people expect them to be, but to know he still is with them and supporting them. And so I think those things make him of all the things he does in the job, I think the very best thing he has done is hire and develop and retain and build trust and relationships with coaches. If I could steal one thing from him on his way out, it would be that right there. Cause I think he probably does that better than anybody that is in the industry.
We've talked a lot about things that Joe has really become a Titan godfather, if you will. A lot of people talk about that. And I think a lot of people expect us to say these kinds of things that we've said over the course of the podcast. But can you give us a behind the scenes lesson or moment that most people, wouldn't have seen, wouldn't know? We all know he loves, a good cup of Joe, and he's great at getting everybody around a table to enjoy a meal, to gather together, to get to know one another. But is there anything that you could share that's maybe behind the scenes, if you will, for the listeners? Ren, you got anything?
I probably don't have as good of a story as what Zach or Nikki would have. I think the thing that I think about sometimes is early on, when Joe would call or return a call or would set up a meeting, it was like I was getting a chance to sit with the President of the United States. I was so excited and so eager to learn. But once you develop a relationship with him, if you get one of those phone calls from him when he's driving, you're going to be on the phone for a while. Like you're gonna have it's 45, 50 minutes. And there's probably been a time or two where dinner is set on the table and my wife's looking at me. I'm like, what do you want me to do? It's like a Mount Rushmore athletic director here. I'm going to finish this call till he's done. But he is, like we all get to a place where we rush through things because of what I said earlier, that time being such a valuable commodity. But that's probably my most favorite conversations with him is he would be driving back from a meeting in Dallas to Norman. He would pass North Texas's campus. It would remind him of me. And he would call and we would talk for 35 or 40 minutes with no agenda, just talking. Probably that's the thing that might surprise people because most of us have gotten to a place where we want those conversations to be concise because we have so many of them in a day. And you catch Joe at the right time and place, and you're gonna discuss a lot of different topics over a period of time.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Moore, what about you?
I actually just pulled out some quotable quotes that I kept track of at Oklahoma, and the theme as I'm looking through them is Joe's sense of humor. He looks like a real serious guy, and he is. He's very serious about what he does and all that. But it's like here's one: how OU stretches our marketing opportunities to the max. He said they use everything but the cluck. We use everything but the oink. I don't know. I mean, it's just like silly little things. I remember we were talking about how many golf carts could we have, on the OU campus, and he was like, are our golf carts having offspring? It's just like these sort of funny moments of levity that that he could deliver. But the other thing that comes to mind is how he embraces people, their whole person. I had my son when I was at Oklahoma, and literally had my baby in the office for a fair bit of time, and you just think about that was 25 something years ago. So he's always been pretty progressive, in very committed to providing opportunities for people that might not otherwise have them. And there is no chance that I would have had the career that I've had without his ability to see in me something that I couldn't see, his consistency in continuing to give me challenges in things that I hadn't shown that I could do yet, but that he gave me those opportunities to keep going. He pushed me into professional development things that I wouldn't have thought I made sense for me. I guess I'll stick with the sense of humor, something people may not always see.
Great. Zach, what about you?
He does have a great sense of humor. And I think we talk about the care that he has for everybody on this call. I'll say the care he's got for our families too. I'll never forget, and he loves old school cars. And I was sitting at home one Saturday and look out the window, and this old school car pulls up. And I'm like, wait, that looks like Joe C. And sure enough, and he walks really fast. That's always something that you tell him, slow down, man. You're walking like somebody's chasing us. But he had just stopped by the house unannounced to pick up our youngest daughter, Meatball, and take her to Sonic to get a Coke. And those are the kind of things where he could be doing a lot of other things, and you're living in a world where there's always constantly coming, but to care not only about your staff, but also care about their families, that goes a long way. The other one, he's got a great competitive spirit too. He played football at Maryland, and I remember, and Dr. Moore, I believe, was one of the first to start the staff advances, because you can't ever retreat, so you always got to advance. But we were doing, and Joey, I know you've led those in your career at Oklahoma too. We were at his lake house in Eufaula, Oklahoma, and he's got 2 Sea-Doos, and a lot of staff, get the training key, so you can't go very fast. But there was one morning I happened to wake up early, and he was by the coffee pot, and it's probably 6:15, 6:30 in the morning. We're drinking coffee, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go for a race?" And I think he's kidding with me. He goes and gets the adult keys for the Sea-Doos. We go out, and again, this whole time, I think we're not about to race on Lake Eufaula. And then by this time, it's about 7 a.m. And of course, for him, and Nikki said excellence, you had to make sure the nose of your Sea-Doo was lined up the exact right way. And then when he said, count down at 3, 2, 1, we're rolling. So you got this titan of the industry hauling tail across a flat water in Eufaula, Oklahoma is something I'll never forget. Of course, I let him beat me, though, but don't tell him that. I hope he doesn't see this.
Did he lose his phone, or did you lose your phone? I remember somebody lost a phone in that.
Yeah, there was a phone lost. It was another person on staff.
Well, in wrapping up here, and thank you guys for sharing. I think that I know he'll be listening, Zach, and I know that he'll smile in hearing all these things. But in closing here, you have staffs that who are hopefully listening and hopefully wanting to gain knowledge from this and how they can be better leaders and administrators. So for you, how would you encourage them? What's something that you would ask them to mimic or replicate in their own lives and their own leadership that you took from Joe? Let's start with you, Zach.
say always remember it's never about you. It's about student athletes, about the coaches, staff. Think be fearless, and we're living in a time where there's a lot of unknowns. But Joe was always great about controlling what he could control and be fearless to take steps forward. And then I think the last thing would say would be just never take yourself too seriously. Again, everybody knows the unbelievable accomplishments that Joe's had over his career, but he always cared about the small things. Sitting down with you, having a cup of coffee, going for a walk. I just went with a walk. I went with him on a walk yesterday, and I think we both ended with, man, that was good for the soul. All the chaos, and despite where you're at in your career, I think find those small moments, find those relationships that can really help fulfill you, because it's always going to help uplift other people. I'll say this: I know one of the lines we always like to say is, you leave something better than you found it. And college athletics as a whole is better because of Joe Castiglione. I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to get to work with him again. And I'm excited because I know our relationship, it is a family relationship.
Ren?
Yeah, I think it is taking the time to be present in the moment and really invest in others. When you look at, it was mentioned earlier, the continuity Joe's had with coaches, but he's had great continuity across his department. But that hasn't come at the expense of helping others try to grow and get to where they want to be. Zach and Nikki obviously are two examples of that. Part of the reason he's had such talented people is people know when they go to work for him, he's going to try and invest in them and help them get better and help them get to where they want to be. And so I think his willingness to be present with each and every person, to invest in them and make them better, to care as much about the inputs as the outputs from those who are in his organization, is something that we can all learn from and aspire to get to his level of excellence when it comes to that.
Great. Dr. Moore?
I think when I think back to being at Oklahoma and being on a team of people that really was working together in a lot of ways and we made each other better. We learned from each other. I think Joe fostered that. I think he fostered both that kind of autonomy to explore and try to make things better and whatever responsibilities that you had, and also make each other better. And I think part of how he did that were things like, as Zach was describing, those gatherings, bringing people together. He invited us into his home. He invited student athletes, and we had SAC events in his home and that sort of thing. He was Joe is Joe if he's whatever the circumstance is, and whomever he is authentic and genuine. So I think those are big ones. And Joe also has always been a champion for the university that he serves. It's not just about athletics. It's not just about the coaches and the student athletes. It's about representing the University of Oklahoma with the kind of respect that it should have. And he instilled that, I think, in me for sure. But I think especially in this era, as but as things are changing very quickly, sometimes it can feel like folks lose sight of the fact that part of our job as directors of athletics is to serve our institutions and to align with our institutions in ways that help our institutions become better versions of themselves. And I think Joe modeled that really, really well. I think the University of Oklahoma is just so much better today than it was 30 years ago when he came there. And that's, of course, there's a lot of people there, but Joe has always been very careful to ensure that he is in alignment with his university and supportive and respectful, and representing with a great deal of respect and care for the institution itself.
Thank you. Well, how fortunate are we that we had the opportunity to get to work with him firsthand, and we still get to continue to learn from him each and every day. To our listener, I hope you enjoyed as we got a moment to celebrate him and all that he's done over his time. So thank you, and that's it. We'll sign off.
Thanks for listening to episode 18 of the Cows Report. A special thank you to Joe Castiglione for sharing reflections from an extraordinary career, and to Nikki Moore, Zach Selman, Ren Baker, and Joey Bailey for honoring the leadership lessons and legacy that continue to shape college athletics. You can find the Cows Report on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media at AD Symposium on X and at the Cows Report on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can also visit us anytime at adsymposium.us for event details and more content from across the Cows community. Until next time, stay connected, stay encouraged, and keep leading the way in college athletics.